Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the Bills Beat podcast here on iTunes, SoundCloud, WKBW.com. However, you got here. Thank you all for joining in. My name is Joe Buscaglia. I am the Bills Beat dude over here at Channel 7, and with me, as always, almost always, Ty, but Tyler Dunne of Bleacher Report, who just posted a whopper of a feature on good old Marty Bennett this week.
Man, that was a riot. Yeah, he's the most interesting man in football, so figured go back to the old stomping grounds in Wisconsin and take him to Hinterland Brewery, go to a farm, milk some cows, watch a little cow sex, and just see what happens. Get inside this guy's head.
Wait a minute. I think we just, it's been under a minute and the term cow sex was just uttered. All right, great. But for those that don't know, Ty covered the Packers for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel for what, 4 seasons?
Correct, yep.
4 seasons, and so he knows the lay of the land in Green Bay, and so that's got to make for. I actually haven't read it yet. I'm a bad reader because you literally just posted it like half an hour ago. But I promise I'm going to do it.
I don't expect you to hop on it in a half hour, Joe B. Come on now.
I know, but Marty Bennett is very interesting. We've all seen his quotes, so that I'm sure it's a home run. But
always appreciate the plugs at the top,
dude.
A lot of love.
I got you.
A lot of love. Thank you.
I got you. Well, I mean, it's Marty Bennett milking cows. How can you not?
You don't see that every day.
I know.
You don't.
Anyway, so this Buffalo Bills team, not milking cows, but trying to find a GM. So in essence, maybe milking the cow of front offices all over the league. All right, just trying for a transition.
Squeezing the udders of personnel departments all over the league.
Yeah, well, at least 4.
There's your lead, Joe.
At least 4 personnel departments. So far, they've interviewed 4 people. Brandon Beane, confirmed anyway. Brandon Beane from the Carolina Panthers. Trey Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles, who's their director of college scouting. Brian Gaine, the director of director of player personnel for the Houston Texans. And then also Brian, and we're both going to say this name differently, Gutekunst of the Green Bay Packers, who is also the director of player personnel that has been in that role since March of 2016, but has been with the Packers since like 1999. So 4 candidates, and then Brandon Beane is the guy that has gotten the second interview, according to Adam Schefter of ESPN.com, who usually isn't wrong about that sort of thing. So I'll take it for what it's worth. So usually what the second interview means, Ty, and we've seen this with Doug Marrone. We've seen it. No, I'm sorry. Wow, Doug Marrone went all the way back. We've seen this with Rex Ryan. We've seen this with Sean McDermott. I mean, to a certain degree, we've seen it with Jason Botterill because, for all intents and purposes, Botterill is probably going to be the Sabres GM. They usually only use the second interview on the person that they want. Mm-hmm. So Brandon Beane getting that second interview probably means good things for him. But my question, and I know that you were tweeting a little bit about this as the news kind of came in on Monday, is this the right move over a more experienced guy that might be better suited for the role?
Yeah, I think it would absolutely be the wrong move if they go Brandon Beane. And look, we don't know who is going to be a great GM, who would be a fall flat on their face GM and extend the drought. But you got to play your law of averages, right, Joe? I mean, you're talking about Brian Gutekunst, who's been in the Green Bay Packers system under Ron Wolf for 2 decades as a scout, basically. And look what that tree, the scouting tree has produced. You've got, obviously, Ron Wolf going to 2 Super Bowls, winning 1. Ted Thompson winning the Super Bowl. John Schneider going to 2 and winning 1. Reggie McKenzie completely rebuilding an Oakland Raiders team that was in salary cap hell, finding a quarterback in Derek Carr. John Dorsey rebuilding the Chiefs into a perennial winner in a very short amount of time. Even McLuhan, obviously he's not with the Redskins anymore, but he's been a part of 5 Super Bowl teams as a scout. I'm sure I'm missing more in there, but it's produced winning teams. There's something about that system under Ron Wolf, then under Ted Thompson, that would tend to make you think that these guys should be getting jobs on their first interview. Now, I think what's really appealing with Brian Gutekunst too is he was really involved heavily on the amateur side, the college scouting side, up until a couple of years ago, where obviously now he's director of player personnel, overseeing a little bit more, which what I've heard, he has been involved in some of their big free agent signings. The Packers have kind of done a little bit of that the last couple of years, and he's been a part of that. But before then, they've been building almost exclusively through the draft. And he's been Ted Thompson's right-hand man on all of that.
Even more so than Elliott Wolf?
Elliott Wolf is really the pro side.
Okay.
And he's sharp. He'll get a GM chance somewhere. I think he's been, pretty powerful behind the scenes too. But really, Gutekunst has done probably a little bit more in building that team because they lean on the draft so heavily and they plug in undrafted cornerbacks.
Yeah, they're not a big free agent heavy franchise.
No, they'd rather go with a homegrown undrafted guy, a 6th-round pick, than find a veteran off the street like the Patriots. So, just knowing what I know and how that team's been built, I think he should be a slam dunk. I heard his interview went great, that he really did kind of blow away the Pagulas in a lot of respects. But as you mentioned, Brandon Beane gets the second interview. Brandon Beane has the connection to Sean McDermott.
I know, and that's the most important part here, I think, because one of the key, phrases that we've heard from Terry Pagula over both of his press conferences now after firing his GM with the Sabres, Tim Murray, and then with the Bills, Doug Whaley, is one thing that he is really wanting out of his organization. And maybe he's a prisoner of the moment, but I think he's probably right to want this, is communication throughout the building. Now, that's not to say that Brian Gutekunst is not going to bring that whatsoever, but if they allow Sean McDermott to essentially help pick his guy that they know is a guaranteed lock to work hand in hand with the GM, and there's not going to be this infighting and all this reported discord that there was with Doug Whaley, with both Rex Ryan and Doug Marrone. I think that is probably what is driving them a little bit in this. And is that the right way to go? I don't know, maybe not. But I also think that they look at Sean McDermott as the guy, and maybe this is, rather than the GM role being as powerful as it would be in other places, that maybe this is Sean McDermott would essentially be the de facto GM, and the actual GM, if it ends up being Brandon Beane, might just be the guy that comes in, sets up the entire player personnel department, and go from there, and set up the college scouting board. But at the end of the day, the decision comes down to McDermott. So that's the way they're setting things up here, and I think that might. I think the job would be exciting for some of these candidates, but if you're Brian Gutekunst and you're sitting there and looking at the job and all of the different ways to kind of operate, slice up the thing here, is this the ideal job for you if you know that McDermott is probably going to have the final say in all of this?
Well, I think you just nailed it, Joe. And I mean, it would probably take Gutekunst changing the minds of the Pagulas and Sean McDermott, which he might have done. I mean, I'm sure he blew them away with the Packer way and really explaining the specific things they do to identify the good players from the bad players, and down to a character standpoint. That is a huge emphasis in Green Bay. I know that Gutekunst has a big family and would prefer a smaller market, so Buffalo would seem to be perfect for that as well in terms of him wanting the job. I think so, right? Young kids. So that all plays into it. It would definitely take him changing their plans, because everything that we've heard and seen, all the tea leaves have pointed to exactly what you said. Sean McDermott being the guy in charge. But this Brandon Beane hiring would just strike me as a very safe, settling, move along, let's just have harmony kind of choice. I'm not in that interview. Maybe he blew him away too, but
maybe that's what they want. But I will say,
isn't that what the Bills have done so many times?
No, I don't know that they have. I think Doug Whaley was a little bit, striking out from the norm. They brought somebody outside. They kind of had him as the GM in waiting for Buddy Nix, and they went out and got him from Pittsburgh. So with the promise that he would eventually become the GM. But you look at this, and I think it is important to them to have that harmony. That I just seeing, and the way that these things kind of came out about their organization, about the fighting with Doug Marrone, about the fighting with Rex Ryan, whether it be public or not public. I mean, that could not sit well with them. They could not look at that and go, oh, this is fine. This is a normal operating procedure. They want these things tightened down, and I think that's why they might be gearing up towards safe. Now, what I will say, Brandon Beane, from what I've heard from people, it's a very smart and well-respected guy in the NFL community that has maybe not cut his teeth in the feet on the ground college scouting side like Brian Gutekunst, but what he has done is, he's kind of dabbled in a lot of different areas. Maybe not completely in totality, but he's helped set up draft day trades. He's helped manage the cap a little bit in Carolina. I mean, again, those weren't his sole responsibilities, and he wasn't in charge of every single part of that. But he at least does have the knowledge behind it all, and to be Dave Gettleman's right-hand man, that has to kind of stand for something.
Yeah, but also
Gettleman's a good GM.
He is. Right. I mean, we're not talking about a slappy organization here that he's coming from. The Panthers have won a lot of games the last few years, but up until 2012, which is, 4.5 seasons ago, Brandon Beane, was cutting up video, was handing out equipment. I mean, he was working in the media relations department. He wasn't involved in scouting at all up until 4 years ago. Compare that to 2 decades of experience that Gutekunst has. I mean, there really isn't a comparison there. You could say, look, he's an up-and-comer. Let's get him now. Let's mold him. Let's build this relationship with Sean McDermott, and maybe they really want to empower Sean McDermott and have that structure, like you said, where the head coach is in charge. And look, I don't think it was an accident that when the Buffalo Bills website announced that Brandon Beane had this interview, that they didn't even term it a GM. It was a front office position, which
I pointed that out as well, Ty.
Was quickly backtracked, and everything has been GM since.
Yep.
That kind of stuff isn't by accident. We're not making a mountain out of a molehill. There's something to that.
They put the term candidate or interview, I think, 5 different times in the web story, and GM was not even remotely mentioned until it was to Brandon Beane, where it said, he's the assistant GM of the Carolina Panthers. That was the first mention of GM.
Absolutely, which isn't by accident. So you can go that model, and that model can work. Bill Belichick, he's making the decisions in New England. It goes back Andy Reid. I mean, although I would say I think that John Dorsey does do a lot of decision-making himself in Kansas City.
But with Sean McDermott knowing what he knows of Andy Reid and how Andy Reid operated in Philadelphia, he probably sees that as the model to how he wanted to operate his teams.
Which maybe Gutekunst would be the perfect choice. I mean, Dorsey.
Well, why is that? If Andy Reid had the power in Philadelphia to essentially operate as draft day GM and control the 53, all that good stuff, he had all that power. Now, why would it be the perfect opportunity for a rising star like Gutekunst if he doesn't really have that final control, so to speak?
Well, I'm just saying in terms of the relationship working out, because Gutekunst and John Dorsey worked together for several years. They know what each other's thinking when they look at prospects. They come from the same system. John Dorsey has an element of power to some degree there in Kansas City and is able to make it work with Andy Reid and trade up for a Patrick Mahomes like they did this year.
Right.
That tells me that, hey, if Gutekunst worked with John Dorsey, Andy Reid knows Sean McDermott really well. They kind of know how their personalities might all mesh when those decisions have to be made.
Sure, yeah, and that's a fair point. But back to the safe aspect, I think that's the overwhelming thing here. If I had my druthers, I'd probably go for a guy like Brian Gutekunst. But the fact that he does not have that working relationship with Sean McDermott, I think that plays heavily into this whole discussion. I mean, there was a reason that Brandon Beane was brought in first to be the interview. I mean, he now gets a second interview. He was mentioned as a candidate even before Doug Whaley was fired by Jason La Canfora in his report ahead of the draft. So that said, I mean, this is 6 years of working with Sean McDermott in his back pocket. And no matter how impressive Brian Gutekunst is, or Trey Brown from Philadelphia, or it's escaping Brian Gaine from Houston, no matter how impressive they were in that one interview, there is 6 years and a strong recommendation from the guy that is the most powerful man in Buffalo sports that isn't the owner right now, and that's Sean McDermott.
So it comes down to what Terry and Kim Pegula want to do, right? I mean, they own the team. I mean, they can overrule the head coach.
Yeah.
They can say, we're going to hire this guy.
They could.
It's up to them.
They could, but I think they've put total faith. I think they have fallen in love with the idea of Sean McDermott, for better or worse. It could work out swimmingly. It could be the matter of fact that gets them finally back into the playoffs after how long it's been. And they've done a lot of things that the right way. They've essentially gutted the entire building. I mean, from the scouting side, the player personnel side, those guys are all gone. They've changed a lot of back of the office types to, kind of actually change the culture, which is a buzz term around the NFL, but they've actually gone through and done it. And a lot of people would have argued that the Pegulas should have first done it when, Doug Marrone walked out. But I guess that might have been a little bit too much disharmony back then when they were first-time owners. So they sat and watched it happen in front of them. They realized that it's not the way that they wanted to go about things, and now they're kind of gutting everything. So because Sean McDermott is the apple of their eye, and because he has been so strong in delivering this message the way that I think that they want it to be delivered and to go about operating this team, it is not a coincidence. I know we talked about this too, that when Pegula was talking about the potential Sabres GM and what he's looking for, he basically listed out the characteristics that he found in Sean McDermott as that person, that he wanted to lead that organization. So I don't think there's a coincidence here, and I think they are all in, so to speak, with Sean McDermott.
Which when we talked about this on our last podcast, which they were on draft day, because I can say that from what I've gathered, there is some truth to the tweet that Jason Locavora put out, at least on the one part of the tweet that the owner liked Patrick Mahomes. The owner wanted the quarterback. That is right there. No, I don't think that was the last straw for Doug Whaley. I mean, he was good as gone before the draft. So I will say, Sean McDermott is the apple of his eye. But finding a quarterback, maybe a bigger apple in his eye. And when you look at it, and he's in this interview with Gutekunst, you just know what this guy's telling the owners. He's saying, look, I come from a system that identified and drafted Aaron Rodgers 24th overall. That was Ted Thompson. Before that, trading for Brett Favre, which everybody thought Ron Wolf was nuts when he gave away a first-round pick for Favre. Fast forward, John Schneider uses and this was a Schneider decision, not really a Pete Carroll. It was John Schneider who reached for Russell Wilson 75th overall, even though they just signed Matt Flynn. People thought he was nuts. You go to the Raiders, Reggie McKenzie gets Derek Carr 36th overall. If you don't have a quarterback, you're not going to win. Those are some of the best in the league.
And they did it without the first overall pick, which is what happened in Carolina with Cam Newton.
And you've got Doug Whaley complaining about quarterback purgatory. Well, that's not purgatory right there. I mean, that's finding quarterbacks.
Continuing to add. You build a really strong case. I mean, the Ron Wolf tree is impressive.
I think Terry knows it takes a quarterback to win in this league. And that case, that might just blow him away to a point where this has to be the hire, because you don't know. Brandon Beane just hasn't been in scouting long enough to know. You haven't seen where those Panther scouts have gone to other teams. You know what Gutekunst, what all these Packer guys have done at that most important position.
I also believe that the Bills have been convinced by Sean McDermott that they can make the playoffs this year. And in doing so, they instead opted to not go for the quarterback that they knew full well would be sitting in this year.
Yeah.
To instead find 3 top players within the first 63 picks that all have a pretty good shot at starting this year to dramatically improve the roster. They got a right tackle out of it, they got a wide receiver, and they got a corner that actually fits Sean McDermott's system. So, that's why we're talking about the Sean McDermott influence here. And they know at the end of the day the quarterback is the most important thing, but at the end of it, he is the guy making the call. And Terry Pegula, although being an owner for the past 3 years, is not really that long in the tooth in identifying strong quarterback options in the NFL draft. So to him, he trusted Sean McDermott's judgment here, and I think they're going to trust McDermott's judgment all the way through here, which probably includes hiring, potentially, Brandon Beane as the general manager of the team.
Which obviously means, Joe, that Patrick Mahomes is going to be a Hall of Famer.
Oh, I love Mahomes.
Gutekunst is going to be hired by the Jets next year's GM. They're going to find a quarterback next year, probably Sam Darnold, and let's leave the Bills in the dust. That's That's how it's going to work, right? That's how the
Well, they
curse
do
works
have
in
the
Western New
two.
York.
They do have the 2 first-round picks now, so they have some mobility.
See, all right. Can we talk about that real quick?
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Okay.
No, Ty. We're not allowed to talk about anything on our podcast. You can talk about your beard for 20 minutes. I don't care.
Hey, you know what? I just shaved my head and I didn't cut myself, Joe.
Is that the first time ever?
It's the first time in the last 2 or 3 times.
Wow.
Because
Tyler.
this scar right there from high school basketball, I caught an elbow, was bleeding all over the court, had to stitch it up, came back. I went over that the other day, and it was like a replay from high school basketball. Our Ellicottville and North Collins viewers can remember that one. But where the hell was I talking about? All right, the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
All right, so I like it. It was a good trade. They haven't done something like that in years. When you think about the future, you accumulate picks, you still get starters for this year. All good things. I think it was a good move. But this notion that, all right, there's these 3 stud quarterbacks next year, now you have the ammo to get one of them. The Bills, like you said, they're going for the playoffs this year. They're going to be that 8-8, 9-7, 10-6 kind of team.
They also could bottom out.
They could bottom out, but I'd say that they've got the talent to not bottom out, where there were a lot of teams in this current draft that we just saw pass on quarterbacks. They didn't like them. The Jets, the Niners, the Browns. I know they took Kaiser in the second, but they could take another quarterback next year. All 3 of those teams are going to finish worse than Buffalo. I mean, I'd be surprised if one of them didn't. All 3 of those teams could take all 3 of those quarterbacks. Are they really going to get out of those spots? Maybe another team above them
I
could.
think your best friend here is the Chicago Bears, because the Chicago Bears are ready to take a trip to Suck City in 2017. I mean, and they have their quarterback of the future.
Not a fan of Suck City. Not a fan of Suck City.
Neither are fans. But the thing is, if the Bears get first overall, because they might have the worst roster in the NFL right now. It is a strong contender.
Pretty rough.
But that said, I mean, Mike Glennon's their starting quarterback right now, and I'm not really trusting a guy with a 5-13 record with a terrible roster around him to uplift them. So if the Bears get first overall, and we're playing in Fantasyland now, if the Bears get first overall, that means if these quarterbacks actually come throughout the season, they're still top prospects. The Bills sitting there with a couple of first-round picks, maybe chuck in a first next year or a second next year, something along those lines. Hey, Bears, what'll it take to get up from wherever the Bills are, 11 to 1?
Yeah.
I mean, they have the ammo now. And let's say the Bears are second overall. The Bears are their best friend right now, because you want them to be as bad as possible.
Yeah.
So that way, for a fact that team is not going to take a quarterback in the top 2 or 3 and go from there. So I also think there's a high combustibility factor in Kansas City this year, because Alex Smith is all well and good. I do think that fans in Kansas City get frustrated with Alex Smith. And I also believe that there might be some pressure from the outside in to see what Patrick Mahomes has to offer.
This year, you think that could happen?
I would prefer that it didn't, because I think he could be really special. Mm-hmm. But, I could see things not going well the first first 8 games or so, and then there's some pressure coming out. Also remember, they're playing in the AFC West. They play Denver twice, they play Oakland twice, they play Los Angeles Chargers twice.
That sounds weird to hear that.
I know, I agree. But those are 6 tough games, and they play the NFC East this year. So Philly was much improved last year. Carson Wentz is in his second year. Washington, still probably going to contend. Dallas, who was great last year, and the Giants, who are always right there. So those are 10 tough games right away without even looking at the rest of their schedule. So I think Kansas City could come back to earth a little bit this year. I really do, and that could put the Bills in even of a better spot.
Boy, that defense is nasty, though. They have
I agree.
One of the best, maybe a top 3 defense still, even after losing Poe.
They are good, but their schedule should not be ignored here. Yeah. And there is some toughness to it, and I think that's why maybe the Bills are kind of holding on to hope that this thing goes their way. The Browns probably did the best of anybody in getting a future first-round pick, because they took it from the Texans, who will be starting either Tom Savage or Deshaun Watson this season. So, it could be better, but, it's still pretty good for the Bills to get that second first-round pick.
Plus, we got a Tom Savage referencing on this podcast, which I always like.
Oh, hat tip to the Around the NFL podcast because anytime Tom Savage comes up, they play this drop that goes, Tom Savage is real, and I love it. I die laughing every single time. But he is real. He's going to be a real thing. And John McClain of the Houston Chronicle just said today that barring any injury, Tom Savage will be starting the first game of the year for the Houston Texans. Yeah. So how neat is that?
Not very neat.
Well, Tyler, this Bills GM search, I know it's not an ideal one, so to speak, because I don't know if it's the same sort of building with the GM first and then head coach, but I think the Bills at the very least have a plan for what they want. And even if I think we both kind of favor Brian Gutekunst here, which by the way, we've pronounced Gutekunst about 6 different ways since we started taping this, which is,
I think by the end of it, you're pronouncing it like me. I think he caved.
I caved?
I think he caved. Gutekunst?
I've been differing between that and Gutekunst the whole time. I'm just trying to go with the plays that are called Ty. But this GM search is ending with likely the Bills going with a guy that they know will be harmonious. And I know it's not the desired thing for you or I, but I think the Pagulas just want a little bit of a steady hand.
So you think it's almost a done deal then?
I mean, the second interview factor, you have to look at it that way.
Maybe they're like, you know what, we'll give you one more chance. We'll take one more look at you.
That's usually not the way it goes because they're actually flying him to Buffalo.
Oh, but they were flying around looking at all these quarterbacks too. Didn't take any. Until the 5th round.
Terry Pagula just kind of wanted to see how the sausage was made, like I talked about. He never done it before.
I don't. I still think it's up in the air.
Do you? Well,
yeah. I will agree, but let's agree on this. That I'm with you that they are taking the right steps and building this thing up. And I know they got some criticism for doing this backwards and going with the head coach before the GM. But I thought that I think it was Michael Lombardi, the former executive, had a story in The Ringer that was really good,
I agree.
And breaking down the Bills situation. And like you said, this is just how it works. I mean, you let your scouts finish out their contracts, finish out their work. I mean, they have all this intel on all of these guys. Are you just going to hit delete on all of that and have nobody looking at anything like the Redskins did? But I don't think so. You don't want that valuable information just kind of floating out there. He articulated that really well. So, yeah, maybe they knew they were all dead men walking, but they're still looking to impress other people in that room for future jobs, and I think there's a pride factor. I don't think it was maybe as awkward as we all would assume it to be. I imagine it was a little bit, but they're just finishing their jobs. All right, let them go. Now get it right at GM. Find the right GM.
But I think the other thing we have to consider also is the approach here. Is it right? And I know this is something we've kind of snuck in every once in a while, but is it right to trust a 4-month-old head coach with no prior experience on the job to be your de facto GM and be the most powerful voice in the entire organization?
Well, that's why I lean toward Gutekunst.
Yeah.
I mean, and
I think that's probably why they're leaning towards Beane, because they don't want that infighting to happen anymore. They want that to be gone. I mean, they must have hated every single time a report came up that Doug Whaley and Rex Ryan weren't agreeing on things.
Who's to say that Beane and McDermott start working together and the stakes get raised? And
you could say that about anybody.
They could disagree just like anybody.
But they have history on their side. And I think,
I've got history with people that I've fought with before, though, too, I think we all work with people that we don't necessarily see eye to eye with.
True, but would you bring that person with you to your new job?
Some of them I probably wouldn't.
Right. So if for him to bring him along to such a prominent position within the organization that he is the front man for, you'd have to think that there's a pretty strong working relationship there, which is why, if you're going to take optimism out of the potential Brandon Beane hire, I think that's why fans should be encouraged about that guy. Now, is he the strongest talent evaluator in terms of being a college scout and, kind of going through the paces that way? Probably not. But, I mean, he has been with the Panthers organization since 1998.
And there's something to be said for a grinder who works his way up like that.
Oh, yeah.
We shouldn't diminish that.
Absolutely
completely.
not. And he's a young guy for the position, too. He's 40 years old. He's 3 years younger than Brian Gutekunst. So this this hire to them is probably more than just safe, but I think the safe factor is what is probably driving it more than anything, because the combustibility factor is so much lower here. And, I get it. I understand that it's not the flashiest pick, but this is also a guy that interviewed for the same job that Brian Gutekunst just did in January, the San Francisco job. I mean, he was on the short list, so it's not like he's a candidate to sneeze at or anything like that. It's just the Bills, I think, want to go with something that they know and that they know is going to work.
Can they find a quarterback? That's what we don't know.
Next year. Got it. Has to be next year, I think. Two first-round picks. I think you have to take that firm swing.
Because that was Whaley's demise. He could not. I mean, him and
he outright
his scouts
refused through the draft.
Well, I mean, and then when they did strike, I mean, let's put E.J. Manuel on him. I think we can do that. Then it was a complete and total miss. So
yeah, it was.
The faith in him the years after that, like you just mentioned, they passed on quarterbacks. So you just need to find somebody here who knows the most important position, and that's just maybe Brandon Beane does. Maybe he's a quarterback wizard. I don't know, but just from the Packers' experience, seems like everybody who's come out of there has nailed that position.
No, I mean, you're not wrong, and they've done it outside of the realm of the first overall pick. I mean, you laid it out there. Russell Wilson, Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers, all of these different guys that were below 20th overall. I mean, they have been found outside of the top 10, but, I think they are just very almost hell-bent on having a more communicative and maybe family-like environment. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's not the right way to explain it, but a very strong bond within the inner workings of the building. And if they don't have that again, if they have the same thing that kind of happened with the last GM with the last two coaches, then I think they would absolutely hate that. So a lot of this is whether or not, Terry Pegula is a little bit of a prisoner of the moment. And is he reacting to things that just were, or is he making a move with foresight about what could work potentially down the line? And that would probably be the biggest concern to me more than anything.
And, all these other past Packer execs, it's not like they went to those teams and were suddenly like what's the term? Something executioner? Law. Help me out, Joe. Judge, jury, and executioner.
You got it. I'm with
Seattle, Pete Carroll has a lot of say.
Mm-hmm.
In Kansas City, like we just mentioned, Andy Reid has a lot of say.
Mm-hmm.
Reggie McKenzie pretty much runs the show for the Raiders, but there's been peaceful deliberations of power elsewhere with people from that system. So I don't think that Gutekunst would be coming to Buffalo like, all right, I'm making all the decisions. Now look, he probably would want control of the 53. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's really the sticking point here. Sure. Is who gets to control.
And this is all speculation, obviously.
We got to speculate, right? But I don't think it's good to assume, all right, he wants to come in and have total, complete, utter, absolute control. Because those other guys really don't. And it works out. Seattle's winning every year, and the other two teams are now too.
It's a very complex issue, as most things are with the Buffalo Bills, I've found over the past 4 months. But, hopefully we will not have to be talking about a turnover of the head coach or GM next offseason. I think that's probably a fair and safe bet at this point. Hopefully, I say, because, there's been, covering both the Bills and the Sabres, it's been, head coach and GM.
I get your inclination, too, on not wanting the infight, and you have sure seen your share of that with the Bills.
Yeah, I mean they just want things inside that building to change, all in all. And that's why they've made as many moves as they have.
Right.
That's why they've allowed Sean McDermott to kind of refocus a lot of different departments over at One Bills Drive and repurpose them, get new people in there, fresh eyes, fresh blood, everything like that. It's been something that has been needed over at One Bills Drive for a long time. And, it stinks because good people are out of jobs, but at the same time, if it's not working, it's a very competitive business. it's not working, you have to change things every once in a while. The Bills just haven't. So that's why they should get high marks so far. Is it going to work? That's the thing they have to sit down and prove.
Yeah, I don't know. Just made me think of a story that the great Bob McGinn told me on our podcast out in Green Bay, that when he covered the Packers in the 80s, when they were terrible, it was in New Orleans. Forrest Gregg is the coach, former Lombardi tackle, and they just got creamed. And he's like doing his interview out where the fans are. I don't know the way it was set up, but all the fans were chanting. He said, "Fumigate the building, fumigate the building," and he yelled back at him, but that's kind of what you feel around One Bills Drive now. They're fumigating the building. They're cleaning it out in every which possible way.
They've done it, and now we're sitting here with a brand new head coach on the precipice of having a brand new GM, probably two guys that have worked together pretty extensively with Brandon Beane. I mean, I know you said you wouldn't rule out Gutekunst, but the second interview factor, man, they just don't hand out second interviews to people that don't eventually get the job. Maybe that's something that they'll change up the history, but this is now 3 different examples within the past, how many years? 4 years that have likely ended with the person getting the second interview getting the job. So in that respect, and the fact that Brandon Beane's actually coming to Buffalo, I think that all plays into it, man.
You might be right.
You do.
I was wrong when I was saying that they're seriously thinking about a quarterback. They gave McDermott the power there.
Trust your boy. Trust your boy.
We should make a wager, though.
Trust your
for
boy.
fun. I'll say they go Gutekunst. I think he blew him away, and they throw everything else onto the wind. They hope for the best. I hope this relationship works, and they hire the more qualified candidate here.
If they hire Brandon Beane, here's the wager. If they hire Brandon Beane, you, on the next podcast, will have to wear a button-down shirt and a tie. If they hire Brian Gutekunst, and I'm sticking with that pronunciation now, I will wear a bowl shirt, a little scoop shirt like you. Do we have a deal?
I'm not a shirt and tie guy. I'm not a shirt and tie guy.
Well, Ty, I mean, you were sitting here wanting to wager. Here it is.
Okay. All right. I thought we could work some NBA jerseys into this somehow.
No. That's playing right into it for you.
All right. Let's tweak it a little bit.
He wants to tweak.
Now, if Gutekunst is hired, can I wear a Charlotte Hornets jersey on a podcast?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
It will probably be going on TV.
Really?
Yeah. I put you on. The reason why we're doing this on camera right here, Ty, is because you go on the newscast.
Oh man.
Get yourself some exposure.
Oh man, I guess I got to start wearing shirts and ties.
You don't have to wear a tie.
Clean myself up a little bit.
No, but listen, I think that's a fair bet.
Well, all the more reason to wear a Larry Johnson or Glenn Rice jersey if it's going to be on TV.
There you go.
Okay.
So we have a wager. Everyone, if Ty doesn't wear a shirt and tie on the next podcast, and Brandon Beane he's buttoning up his tie right now, his little scoop shirt right now. Everyone has the total responsibility to give him as much flack and guff as possible.
Please. I hope they do.
Okay. All right, Ty. I think that about wraps it up for us.
Yeah.
So you say Gutekunst. I agree that he's a good hire, but I'm probably going Brandon Beane.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks everyone to listening into this version of the Bills Beat podcast. Again, thank you to Ty for jumping in and hosting another one. But if you have some time, go read his Martellus Bennett feature over at BleacherReport.com. Always good stuff. Always and some fun video too. So you want to check that out. And again, thanks for checking us out, whether it's on iTunes, SoundCloud, or on WKBW.com. And by the time we talk next, we'll probably have a GM. So we will see you then. Bye.